My parents skipped my son's first birthday and texted, "That kid wasn't a blessing. He was a mistake." I just replied, "Noted." Then I closed the joint utility account and triggered a review on their mortgage application I co-signed. The next morning, my dad called me laughing. That afternoon, he opened his email and found a denial notice from the bank. Then came the panic and 47 missed calls. I hated them for not coming. Everyone else did, neighbors, coworkers, even my cousins who lived 4 states away. The house was full. People were laughing. Leo was chewing on the corner of his birthday hat like it was the best day of his life. And I stood there pretending it was mine too. But the whole time, I kept looking at the door. I had invited them, sent the text a month ago, sent another the week before. They didn't respond either. Not even a polite excuse. I kept hoping they'd walk in anyway. Late like always, but they never showed. And the worst part, I didn't even know what to tell the guests. Everyone kept asking where my parents were. My uncle raised his eyebrows like it was some inside joke. Even my cousin Tyler said, "Didn't think your dad would miss this." I just shrugged. No idea what else to do. They hadn't come to Leo's birth either. Kate was in labor for 19 hours and I was sending updates from the hospital thinking maybe they'd at least say something. But nothing. Not a text, not a call. My son was born and my parents were at a wine tasting. Seriously, they said it was about timing or traffic or flights, but I knew the truth. They blamed Kate. Said she took me away from them, that I changed, that I didn't help them effectively anymore. It started subtly. Fewer calls, less interest, then the little jabs during holidays, then the full-on accusations. The last real conversation we had ended with my mom saying, "You're a stranger to us now. We don't know who you've become." But the email they sent a few days before Leo's birthday, that was different. That was final. This boy was not a blessing. He was a mistake. That line sat in the middle of a paragraph like they didn't realize how much it would burn. Or maybe they did. Maybe they wanted it to. The rest of the email was about how Kate had turned me into a different person. How I didn't prioritize family. How they didn't feel appreciated anymore. I didn't reply with a rant. I didn't call. I just sent back one word. Noted. Then I opened my laptop. First, I closed the joint utility account they'd been running under my name. They got better rates because of my credit score. Then I called the bank and initiated a full review of their mortgage application. I had co-signed it back when Dad needed it to refinance after the poker losses. Didn't tell them anything. Just clicked submit and went to bed. Next morning, Dad called not to apologize. He laughed. Said I was being dramatic. Said, "Come on. Don't take things so personally." I hung up. That evening, he opened his email. Application denied. Account review in progress. Primary cosigner no longer attached. Then came the calls. First 2, then 10. By morning, 47. No voicemails, no texts. Just silence punctuated by panic. That's when I realized something that stuck with me. They didn't care about me. They cared about what I could do for them. And if they thought I wasn't helping effectively, maybe it was time I stopped helping at all. For good. I blocked them the same night the calls hit 47. I didn't want to hear their voices. I didn't want another guilt trip. I didn't want Dad pretending this was all some joke I was taking too seriously. There was nothing left to say. They made their position clear with that email, and I made mine just as clear with my reply. Noted. That was the only closure I needed. Kate was the only one who looked nervous about it. Not upset, just cautious. She grew up in a quiet family where nobody raised their voices and everyone brought side dishes to every dinner, even when nobody asked. I knew all of this shook her, but she didn't try to stop me. She just said, "I don't think they'll let this go." She was right. 3 days passed. Then I got a text from my sister Olivia. It just said, "They're devastated. Can you please just call Mom?" Like I was supposed to forget the part where our own mother said my son was a mistake. Olivia was always the soft one in the family. She never stood up to them. Even when she knew they were out of line, she tried to smooth things over instead of confronting it. I didn't answer. I wasn't going to get pulled into a 3-way guilt negotiation. If they wanted to say something, they had my number. But instead of a call, a letter showed up in the mail. Handwritten, no return address. Inside were 3 pages of the most careful gaslighting I've ever read. It started with a soft, "We're sorry if you felt hurt," then immediately pivoted to, "But this reaction has put us in an extremely difficult financial position," followed by a reminder that family means sticking together even when we don't always say the right things. Not a single mention of Leo's birthday. Not a word about what they'd actually said in the email. Nothing about the absence. Nothing about the sentence that had shattered everything. Just a vague, manipulative tone that somehow made their hurt more important than mine. I ripped it in half and dropped it in the trash. The next week, Olivia showed up at our door. She hadn't been to our house in 2 years. Now, she was standing on our porch holding a homemade apple pie like this was some sitcom where everything gets resolved in 22 minutes. Kate took Leo upstairs as soon as she saw Olivia. She didn't say anything, just gave me a look like, "This is your war." We sat at the dining table. Olivia launched into it almost immediately. "They know they messed up, but this has gone too far. They think you're trying to destroy them." I asked her if she thought they messed up. She hesitated. Then she said, "I think everyone's hurt and I think Dad is scared." I said, "That's not my problem anymore. That I wasn't doing this to punish them. I was just done fixing things for them, done covering for them, done being useful." She sighed and then she said something I couldn't forget. "Dad told me that if you're not going to help anymore, then he'll do whatever he has to do to stay afloat." At the time, I thought he meant calling in favors or borrowing from someone else. But now, I think it was a threat, not the violent kind, the desperate kind. The next morning, I got an alert on my phone. A financial institution had flagged a suspicious application using my social security number. It was for a personal loan. The application had all my details, full name, address, SSN. The only thing it didn't have was my signature. It hadn't gone through. The fraud alert I set up a year ago after the Equifax leak caught it in time, but it still felt like someone had broken into my house, like my own father had just picked a lock and tried to steal from me in the most cowardly way possible. That was when I knew this was different. This wasn't just a bad argument. This wasn't a family falling out. This was theft. So I called the credit agency and reported it. Then I called the police. Filing the police report was easy. That's what scared me. I thought there'd be hesitation. Some part of me that paused and said, "Are you really about to report your own father?" But there wasn't. No internal conflict, no second guessing. I just sat down with Leo napping in the other room, opened the fraud alert the bank had sent me, and followed the instructions step by step. I didn't tell Kate at first, not because I was hiding it, but because I didn't know how to explain that my father had filled out a loan application using my name, my social, and my address. He didn't forge a signature, but the information had been submitted. It was enough. 3 days later, the knock came. A local officer from financial crimes showed up at their house. It wasn't an arrest, just routine follow-up. But someone must have seen because by that night, the whole extended family knew. It started with a Facebook post. My aunt, my mom's sister, put up this vague status about how some children forget who raised them and karma hits harder when it's your own blood. Comments flooded in. Cousins chimed in. An uncle messaged me privately asking what the hell was going on. I ignored all of it. Then Olivia called this time. She didn't sound calm or composed. She sounded panicked. "Are you insane? You sent the cops to their house." I told her I didn't send anyone. The bank did. I just told the truth. She said Dad told her it was a misunderstanding. That he never submitted anything. Just saved it in case he needed it later. That was supposed to make it better. That was supposed to erase the part where he tried to exploit my credit again. After I'd already cut him off. After he already knew exactly how much I had at stake with my own mortgage and Leo's future. I told her I didn't care anymore. That I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing it because I didn't trust them. And trust isn't something you can negotiate back into place with tears and phone calls. Later that night, I blocked her, too. I was tired of explaining why I didn't want to be stolen from. But it didn't stop. In fact, it escalated. The next morning, Kate told me someone had been standing outside our house again. It wasn't obvious at first. We live in a quiet neighborhood. Joggers, dog walkers, teenagers cutting across yards. But this was different. This person stopped at our mailbox, just stood there, looked at the house for a minute, then left. I checked our doorbell cam. I didn't recognize him, but I recognized the stance. The way he stood with his arms crossed like he was judging something, like he owned it. The same way my dad used to stand in our garage when he wanted me to feel small. I installed 2 more cameras, one in the backyard, one inside the house above the front hallway. Kate was scared, but she didn't ask questions. She knew better than anyone how far my parents were willing to go to twist the knife while pretending they were just checking in. Then one of our tires got slashed. Just one driver's side front. Nothing else touched. Nothing taken. I reported it. The officer was polite but honest. No witnesses, no prints, no suspects. Just another small crime on a quiet street. But I knew it wasn't random. I knew because of what happened next. A week later, I got pulled into a quick meeting at work. HR said someone had called claiming to be from a government agency requesting income verification. The person had asked for my employment details, my supervisor's name, and said they were verifying financial support for a dependent. That phrase stopped me cold. I don't have any dependents outside of Leo, and no agency needs that info for a toddler. HR didn't give the number, but they flagged it. I did my own digging, called a friend who works in telecom. The call came from a burner phone registered under a prepaid account, but the address used to activate it. My mother's maiden name and my parents' old house. It wasn't some scammer. It was family. They were trying to dig into my life now, into my income, my job. Maybe to use it against me, maybe to ruin me. That was the moment it snapped for me. Not just the trust, not just the fear, something deeper, something final. I had spent months trying to handle this like a son, trying to walk that line between protecting my new family and not completely torching the old one. But they'd already done that. They lit the match and handed it to me. Now I wasn't afraid to let it burn. I stopped waiting for things to calm down. It was never going to happen. They weren't going to apologize. They weren't going to admit they crossed the line. They were going to keep escalating until I folded. That's how they always operated. Apply pressure, make a scene, drag someone else into it when they can't win one-on-one. So I took it out of private. I didn't name names. I didn't post screenshots. I didn't need to. I wrote one post. It was long. It was honest. It laid out exactly what had happened over the last year, from the ignored birth to the missed birthday, the email, the financial betrayal, and everything after. I said I was done covering for people just because we shared DNA. I said, family isn't immunity from consequences. I said, sometimes the people who raise you are the first to turn on you when you stop serving them. I hit publish. By the time I woke up the next morning, it had over 100 shares. I didn't expect that. A few people reached out with support. A few with their own stories. But the interesting part, several relatives I hadn't heard from in years messaged me privately. Not just sympathy, but confirmation. Stories. Half-whispered confessions of how my parents had borrowed money and never paid it back. How they guilt their cousin into co-signing a car and then defaulted. How they told other people I was going through something when I stopped coming to holidays. I wasn't the first one they used. I was just the first one who said no and stuck to it. That weekend they showed up at our house. I didn't see them pull up. I saw their reflection in the glass door. My mom stood behind my dad with her arms crossed. My dad looked like he had something rehearsed. I didn't open the door. I stood in the hallway while they rang the bell over and over. Kate was upstairs with Leo. I told her to stay there. Eventually, they stopped ringing and just stood there. I thought maybe they'd leave. Instead, my dad shouted through the door, "This isn't how we fix things, Ethan. This isn't family." And I said nothing, not a word. I let him hear his own echo bounce off the glass. Then they left. An hour later, I got an email from one of their friends, some guy they'd known since church, who I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. He said he was concerned about the online attacks I was making and warned that this could come back to haunt me. That was the moment I knew they were scared. Not sorry, scared. Their reputation was everything to them. The social circle, the image, the illusion of a happy, tight-knit family. They had never once admitted fault in public. Never once admitted they needed help. They wore pride like armor and used guilt as their sword. So I posted again. This time I didn't just talk about them. I talked about what it feels like to raise a child knowing your own parents will never love him the way he deserves. What it feels like to explain absence. To see your kid point to a photo and ask who that is and know he'll never understand how deep betrayal can go until it happens to him. That post went even further. I stopped checking the shares, the comments, the DMs, but one stuck with me. Someone wrote, "You can't fix people who only see your love as leverage." That line stayed in my head for days because that's what it had always been with them. Leverage, conditional love, love with strings attached, bills included, emotional IUS. They expected me to honor forever. They wanted me to be the one who fixed things. They never realized I wasn't broken. The silence lasted exactly 10 days. No calls, no texts, no emails. I stopped checking Facebook. I stopped waiting for retaliation. For a brief moment, I let myself believe maybe it was over. Maybe public exposure had finally embarrassed them. Enough to back down. Then Kate came home early from the store. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shaking. She looked like she was trying not to break plates with her bare hands. Leo was asleep in the car seat and she said we needed to talk outside. She told me about the woman at the store, how she'd walked up like she knew her. Smiled at Leo, asked how old he was, then said casually like she was commenting on the weather. "He doesn't look much like Ethan, does he?" Funny how that works sometimes. Kate thought maybe it was just a weird old lady, until the same woman leaned in and added, "I guess that's why there's so much tension. People notice things. Must be hard on Ethan." She walked away after that. No name, no questions, just a hit-and-run smear campaign. I knew instantly it wasn't random. It was my mother's language. That creepy, insinuating tone she always used when she wanted to plant doubt without saying anything directly. She used to say the same thing about neighbors, about other people's kids. She loved playing innocent while lighting matches. I logged back onto Facebook. Sure enough, there were new comments on the old post, anonymous profiles, no photos, no real names, saying things like, "Not all children look like their dads unless they are their dads." And a man should get a DNA test before he burns bridges with his real family. The comments weren't trying to be subtle. They were trying to poison the well. They couldn't touch me, so they came for Kate, came for our son. That was it. That was the moment I crossed over into something I hadn't felt before. Not just anger, not just betrayal, this cold surgical kind of resolve. If they were willing to weaponize strangers to attack my wife, then they weren't family anymore. They were enemies, and enemies don't give warnings. First, I contacted the mortgage lender. Since I was still listed as cosigner, I had the authority to flag the account for review. I submitted a full complaint for fraud, provided documentation from the attempted loan application, and included the police report. I told the agent everything, how they'd used my name for years, misrepresented finances, even used my SSN for applications I never approved. They froze the mortgage file. That was going to hit them hard. The house was their biggest asset, their last real sense of control. I knew it wouldn't be immediate, but the investigation alone would wreck their ability to refinance or restructure anything for months, maybe longer. But I wasn't done. I called my lawyer and started the process of issuing a formal cease and desist for harassment. Then I had them draft a custody-specific no-contact agreement designed to prevent any claim or suggestion of visitation or grandparent rights now or in the future. And then, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife a little deeper, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, just like before. Same handwriting, same smug scent of superiority. Inside were 4 things. A photo of me as a baby. A printed copy of my Facebook post highlighted in red pen. A short note that said, "He'll always be our grandson whether you want him to be or not." And a final line in all caps. "You a court order stops blood. Blood finds a way." I took it straight to the police. This time I didn't just report it. I pressed charges for stalking, for harassment, for impersonation. And for the first time, I didn't only name my father. I named my mother, too. She'd hidden behind his outbursts for years. Played the victim while letting him take the heat. But this had her fingerprints all over it. The letters, the rumors, the subtle threats whispered through other people's mouths. They wanted war. Now they had won. I sat down that night, held Leo on my lap, and watched him fall asleep with the toy block still in his hand. And for the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. Not because it was over, but because I finally stopped pretending it could be fixed. I always thought the final moment, the real break, would be loud, some screaming match, one last confrontation, maybe even a courtroom scene with slammed folders and bitter stares. But it wasn't like that. It was quiet, cold, clean. I didn't go to the police again after the tinted car parked near our house. I didn't file another report or try to track down who it was. I just watched it from the kitchen window while holding Leo on my hip. I counted the minutes. 18. Then it drove away. That was the last time they came near. But I didn't mistake their silence for surrender. People like them don't disappear. They regroup. They wait until your guard drops. They come back dressed as something new. Concern, forgiveness, reconciliation. But it's always the same underneath. I had no interest in seeing what they try next. So I finished it. I filed a petition to dissolve my co-signature entirely through legal counsel. It took weeks, but eventually it was removed, declared invalid due to prior fraud and misuse. The mortgage company issued a full report. My father's name was flagged in their internal system. They'd have to find another lender. I didn't care who or where. Kate and I sold our car, bought a new one, different color, different plates, registered it under her name. Every trace of me that used to tie to them I erased. Then came the unexpected part. I got a call from a woman who said she worked for a law firm representing my parents in a separate matter. She asked if I would be willing to clarify my statements made on social media. I told her no. She pushed gently, saying they were seeking restitution for damage to reputation and that informal resolution was still possible. I said very clearly, if they come near my family again, I will not stop at harassment charges. She didn't call back. A month later, Olivia sent an email. It was long, scattered, clearly written in the middle of the night. She said my parents were selling the house, that they were done with this city, that they felt hunted. She said my dad wasn't eating right, that my mom had stopped speaking to most of her friends, that they were planning to start fresh somewhere else. At the end of the email, she asked if I wanted to see them before they left. I didn't answer. There was nothing to see. Not anymore. The people there were had been gone for a long time. That weekend, Leo took his first real steps across the living room rug. I sat on the couch watching, holding my breath like I was watching someone cross a tightrope. He stumbled forward, half walking, half falling, straight into Kate's arms. We both started laughing. Not the kind you fake. The real kind. The kind that sticks to your ribs and makes your chest feel warm. I didn't think about my parents in that moment. I didn't miss them. I didn't imagine how different it could have been. I didn't picture them standing nearby or clapping. That chapter wasn't open anymore. The final thing I did came 6 weeks later. I sent a certified letter through my attorney. Permanent no-contact order. Not legal in the restraining sense. There were no threats to warrant that, but it was formal, final. It said clearly that any further communication through any third party or method would be considered harassment and referred to law enforcement. I didn't expect them to listen, but I didn't need them to. I just needed to be done. And I was. No more letters. No more whispers in grocery stores. No more Facebook accounts with blank profile pictures trying to dig their claws back into my life. Just quiet. And I kept it that way. Leo turned to a few months later. We had a small party. Just us, a few friends, a cake he mostly smashed with his fists. When someone asked about my parents, I just said, "We don't talk." That was it. No drama, no long story, just the truth. And that's how I'll raise him, with truth, with boundaries, with love that doesn't demand a return on investment. Because I've learned something most people never do. Sometimes protecting your child means walking away from the people who raised you. And sometimes family is not who brought you into the world, but who stayed when the world turned ugly.